Hi, welcome back to another video. My name is Roxanne and today I'm going to show you how to make a cashew tofu stir-fry. It's easy, it's healthy-ish, and it's delicious. I always start by cooking the rice. I usually do 1.5 cups of water for 1 cup of jasmine rice, but obviously there may be different ratios if you use a different kind of rice. So just follow along the instructions on the package of the rice you're using. So in the video at this point I'm showing you how to make the sauce, but usually I would make the tofu first, so take that into consideration. So for the sauce, 1/2 cup of vegetable broth, 1/2 cup of tamari or soy sauce, 1/4 cup of rice vinegar, 1/4 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of sriracha, or adjust to your liking, you can add less or more, however you like, and 1/2 tablespoon of sesame oil. And then you just whisk to combine, and you have 2 options. You can cook it in a pan ahead or a small saucepan, or you can later cook it in the pan with the vegetables, but it doesn't thicken as well. I like to make it separately, but you do whatever you want. So I bring this to a boil or a simmer. Then I add 1 tablespoon of cornstarch combined with 2 tablespoons of water, and I mix that in and then bring it to a boil, and then I just let it thicken. So you let it simmer and it's gonna thicken up, and once you're satisfied you just set it aside. Now onto the tofu part, which, like I said, you would make the tofu before and then while it bakes you make the sauce. You know what I mean? So anyway, preheat your oven to 425 degrees. Press your tofu if you're not using super firm tofu. If you're using extra firm, you will need to press it, but super firm tofu, you don't have to, so that's great. So I just cube it, then I combine it with 1.5 tablespoons of sesame oil, and I find that way I don't have to grease my pan, add any kind of oil or even parchment paper. But if you're using tofu that doesn't look super firm and it looks like it may stick or fall apart, you may want to brush your baking sheet with oil before putting the tofu on it, or use parchment paper. But I do recommend to still use the sesame oil because it adds the flavor to the tofu and it gets crispy in the oven, so it's just perfect with the sauce. It's just amazing. So you bake it at 425 for 20 to 25 minutes, and I usually flip about halfway or after 15 minutes even sometimes, just because I like to wait until there's a nice crispy layer before I flip it. Now for the rest of the ingredients, and to finish off the stir fry, I'm adding a teaspoon of oil to a heated pan. I'm about on medium-low heat. Then I add 3/4 cups of raw cashews. I guess they don't have to be raw, but if you use roasted cashews, they are usually salted as well, so it might change the outcome of the recipe a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. So I toast the cashews for about 3 minutes or until they look a bit browned, but not burnt. Then I set them aside for later. In the same heated pan, I add another teaspoon of oil. This one is optional, followed by 1/2 of an onion chopped. Then I cook it until translucent. Then I add a tablespoon of minced garlic, and I cook it for about 30 seconds to 1 minute, and I always make sure not to burn my garlic because burnt garlic is just awful. Now I'm adding 2 heads of broccoli chopped, followed by 2 tablespoons of water. I cover it and let it steam for about 2-3 minutes. That way I get perfect broccoli. Still a bit crunchy, but kind of cooked, kind of par cooked, I guess. Just perfect. If you want it a bit more cooked, you could let it steam a bit longer or add 1 more tablespoon of water. So then I add the cooked rice. Then I add the toasted cashews. By the way, if you want to taste one or two, it's your time. They're like warm and just amazing. If you top them with a bit of salt, just to die for. Now what I like to do, and this is completely optional, but it really doesn't take that long, I like to add the tofu to the sauce before I add it with the rest. I just think it turns out much better. The tofu kind of soaks in a bit of the sauce because it's crispy. And so it soaks in kind of like that flavor, but there's still a bit of sauce left so that everything else gets saucy. It's just amazing that way. It still turns out okay when you mix everything in together and you don't mix the tofu in with the sauce. But I'm telling you, it turns out much better when you do this extra step. Now all that's left to do is just mix everything together and just make sure everything is warmed up. And to serve, I suggest topping with some toasted sesame seeds and some sliced green onions. It could also be nice topped with mung bean sprouts and perhaps even a lime wedge. If you'd like to save this recipe to Pinterest or even print the recipe, I'll leave the link down below to my blog plantbaskedkindness.com. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Please consider subscribing and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!